As 2021 draws to a close, we have a look back at some of our favorite moments from this year, and there have been plenty of those.
To do this, we're joined by the wonderful Chelsea Gohd, senior writer for Space.com, the perfect guest for that end-of-year review.
What's been your favorite story of 2021? Let us know at Space and Things 1 on Twitter and at Space and Things Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. We love hearing from you.
And please consider hitting that share button or leaving a review. But right now, please enjoy episode 69 of the Space and Things podcast.
Oh my God! Unbelievable, but it is right to touch.
You are listening to Space and Things with Dave Giles and Emily Carney.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 69 of our podcast. Now, I know I sound a little bit different this week. Got a different microphone. It's just a temporary setup. It is what it is. Anyway, this is our end of year review. We're recording it on the 21st December, so no mention of James Webb in our lists. We're keeping all our fingers crossed on that one. But before we get on with our guest, Emily, do you have any personal highlights from this year or that you would like to bring to our attention or talk about right now? Because I feel like this is a good time to do it.
Oh my God. Oh boy. Despite COVID, I had all my shots and everything, but I did do some events this year. I did Space Fest and I spoke and I did a panel there and it was amazing. And I also went to Oshkosh Air Venture. And that was probably the highlight personally of the year. I felt I was on top of the world, so I really loved it. That was incredible. Other than that, I'd like to thank my readers for letting me go nuts this year on my blog and right and just speaking out about stuff. I know not everybody's liked it, but I had to get it off my chest. So that if you appreciated it, thank you. If you didn't, may God bless you as well. So
Absolutely. All right, shall we crack on with this interview then?
Yes, absolutely.
We're getting signals from MRO. Tango Delta.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the signs of past life.
So let's get started with our review of 2021. And to help us, we're pleased to introduce you to Chelsea Gohd, senior writer at Space.com. Welcome, Chelsea. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
We're really happy to have you here, actually. So thanks very much for joining us. I'm going to jump right in here. There are loads of places that we can start with this review. But I think that the most incredible thing for me was the landing of Perseverance on Mars back in February and the footage we got from that. Do you know where you were at that point, Chelsea? I feel it's one of those things where in years to come, I remember where I was. Maybe not, but...
Oh, I remember exactly where I was because I moved to California that week. And so I was at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab there with the mission teams watching it launch, and we were all just silent and no one was breathing, and then all of a sudden people started screaming and crying. It was completely insane, and we were all distanced and masked and we couldn't hug each other, but we were all screaming at each other, and it was, I very much remember where I was, and that is certainly among my top 3, if not also my top moment of 2021.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that, you know, the landing and then the footage we got from the landing was just crazy. But what we've already learned from Perseverance and Ingenuity as well. I mean, and Ingenuity on its own. I mean, that's a whole subject, right? 18 flights. 30 minutes in the air.
It's like, it'll probably just do 4 little flights. Don't expect much. It's a tiny, this is just a technology, we're just proving that it works. And it's like, how many flights later? And it's like, I just took a nice half-hour flight down on the surface of Mars. And it's like, definitely don't underestimate what NASA sends to Mars.
Absolutely.
Even despite a couple of initial hiccups, like samples are being cached, the images that it's, capturing, its new navigation system, like everything about it is just amazing. And just what we've been able to collect and learn thus far I mean, the fact that we sent a rover to Mars with the explicit intention of finding evidence of extraterrestrial life, it's made my life a lot easier, because now every time I get an email of people telling me that NASA's hiding alien secrets, it's like, look, NASA's looking for them too. They just sent this rover. I promise. If they had that information, they would be more than happy to share it with you. So.
And just this last week, it's found some organic matter. We don't know what that is yet. Probably isn't life, but it's doing what it was sent to do, isn't it? Which is great.
Yeah, it's always fun when organics have been found, and it's because people jump to, oh, it's some fossilized alien or something like that. But even if it's just, some super basic organic matter, the amount of information that we can extrapolate from that, it's so exciting. So exciting.
Yeah. February was just a glorious time for Mars, wasn't it? 3 vehicles from different agencies all arriving at the same time, and Perseverance comes along in last, making a grand entrance and sending back that epic footage. It was just a great time, wasn't it, to see Mars at the forefront. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but it makes me really excited about what's going to happen with Venus in a couple of years, when suddenly we have a few spacecraft going to there as well. But Perseverance is unlike anything else we've seen. So you put this in your top 3. What else is there in your list?
I guess another part of the Perseverance mission that I haven't shared is the excitement that at least I have around the first audio, because we had seismic data that we could translate into audio waves. So we could listen to Mars quakes. But I mean, this was a microphone on the surface of Mars. And I actually, Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen at NASA put out a public challenge to compose with the audio. And so I stayed up the entire night and posted it at like 4 a.m. And I was like, there you go, Dr. Z, here you go. And so it's just looking at another planet in a way that we've never looked at it before. I mean, to hear the sounds, and that was just the first of many recordings. To hear the sounds like that is just so special to me as a musician as well as a science communicator. So that's part of my top 1. God, this year was just so much happened. It's really hard to choose another. There were a few major steps forward in more niche areas of diversity inclusion in space. Obviously, as we've seen, especially in the last few weeks, there's no shortage of, harassment and horrendous things happening in science and space at large. But I think that there were a few exciting small steps that were taken, like I covered earlier this summer, I believe it was. There has been for a long time, trans astronomers have been, and trans scientists across the board, but specifically have been trying to convince scientific journals to allow them to correct their names to their current names, after transitioning or after changing their names. And for a long time, scientific journals were basically just saying, no, it's against our policy, and essentially dead naming these authors in their papers and separating them from their own work. So they weren't even able to claim it as their own. And then slowly some headway started being made with that later this summer as I was covering it. And journals are starting to change those policies. So it's been, I think it's been a big year for pointing out problems like that. So I don't know if that's a fun, exciting 2021 end of the year list item, but pointing out how horrendous things continue to be for marginalized communities in STEM is definitely top on the list.
Yeah.
I was actually going to bring that up with the two of you, actually. It feels like a bit of a watershed year in that sense. Yeah. Obviously, absolutely. Problems aren't solved. But just in terms of people's empowerment to speak their truths, and we've seen a lot of that this year. And I mean, I'm all for it, and I've learned a hell of a lot as a result of it. But I guess you two have probably got a very different opinion on me being a person that would benefit from everything that's happened in the past, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's been quite a year. I think that it feels like everything's coming to a head, but I think this is very much the tip of the iceberg. Because even with the small things that have come out and surfaced with the handful of people that have been able to come forward or felt comfortable enough to come forward, every little step there, you see backlash of rumors spreading within the community or people not believing their peers and colleagues, and it makes it hard. It's almost like one step forward, two steps back. So I think this year has seen a lot of chipping away at the ice. I think we're starting to peel back that first layer and really expose the issues, which is, of course, the first step in really figuring out what, we as a larger community can do to hopefully make it so that the environment no longer supports and rewards bad behavior, essentially. So, 2021 is certainly not the end all be all. It's not the end. You haven't seen the last of it, but
no, you haven't even seen the last of it this year.
No, definitely not.
To be honest. No, there's more coming out. Oh yeah.
Just in the last couple of weeks alone, so many different people have come forward, especially in commercial space. I spoke with Bill Nelson. We had an interview last week, and I asked him about it. We didn't get too deep into it, but I think too slowly, the community at large is starting to have to pay attention, which I think is part of it, because it is a hard subject and people don't want to talk and hear about it. But I think that it's good in that it's becoming a topic that has to be talked about. People can't ignore it anymore. So I hope that in 2022, we just continue to see more of that. As much as it's painful to hear people's stories and see people come forward, I think that the more of it, the better, because, all of that being hidden only benefits the people doing the bad deeds. So, here's the 2022.
Yeah. I'm hoping in 2022, I don't know if these policies would work, but I'm hoping, more contractors and more agencies develop just a zero tolerance, if we find out about it and we have evidence, you're gone, because that's not happening right now. And I also hope that we see more equity, in the field. Just, I hope I kind of gotten on my soapbox lately online, but I'm hoping we see women achieve, pay equity. I'm hoping we get compensated for things we do fairly.
Absolutely. Pay equity, representation equity, women, and especially women of color and people of different marginalized backgrounds. Sure, space is more diverse and looks different than it did in the 1950s and early 60s, but I think we should expect more of ourselves. I think we should hold ourselves to a higher standard than just being better than the 60s. I think we can set the bar a little bit higher. I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of looking forward to fixing the problem and seeing it grow larger. Not the problem, grow larger, of course.
The discussion. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So on the whole, despite the fact that it's been a hard year in terms of hearing stories, you're fairly positive about everything that's gone on in this regard because of the empowerment and the fact that hopefully the stories being out there means there's a chance of change. It won't be immediate, but that we're on the starting steps towards it.
Positive in the sense that it no longer seems or feels impossible for people to come forward. I know both me and Emily have had our public discussions and stories and aired pieces of our dirty laundry and exposed some of the situations going on, though I'm sure for both of us, what we've shared online is just the tip of the iceberg, if not just...
not all of it.
Of course. But I think that even just little pieces, as much as none of it is positive, I think that even just seeing your peers speak out more comfortably and more confidently, I think there's definitely a trickle-down effect in regards to more people coming forward, more people speaking out. And in the long run, that's going to mean that this is not tolerated. I know that NASA has a zero tolerance policy, not that that means that they've never had issues, but that space companies, especially as more and more of them are cropping up, and not just in space, but in STEM and in space sciences as well, that this is taken more seriously, and it's harder for people to brush under the rug.
I think for me that the next big story that happened in this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for me it was on my radar, would definitely be Inspiration 4.
1,000%. That was the next on my list too. I was like, Inspiration 4.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I remember it being announced just after or around the same time as Perseverance landed. I think it was the same week Perseverance landed, and that first announcement of Haley being on the crew came out, and it was like, whoa, hang on a moment, this is going to be good.
Yeah, I remember I'd heard an inkling from a friend of mine that Cyan was going to be chosen. And so Cyan and I are friends. As you know, anyone that's met her knows that she's an easy one to make friends with. And we did our Mars mission together last year. And I texted her, I was like, I heard this rumor that you're going to be on Inspiration 4. Like, is it true? She's like, no, I wish. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because we'd had a conversation after she applied.
Oh, wow.
We were on the phone and she was like, you know, I want to throw my hat into the ring. I don't want to say that it's impossible. You know, I don't want to kick myself for not having tried, but probably not going to get it. And so I text her, I'm like, you know, is this true? She's like, no. The next day, I see her on TV. They're announcing the full crew. I'm texting her. I'm like, you liar. But like, you know, mostly just congratulations. It was so exciting to get to see a friend launch to space and back, to see like the impact that it had, not just on the space community, but people who I know who have never cared about space were suddenly texting me about following Inspiration 4 and following it on the news. And very selfishly, it was exciting for me because Cyan, as I mentioned, I'm also a musician, and she took one of my songs with her to space on her personal playlist. And I was like, you don't have to do that. And she was like, it's not a big deal. And I was like, it's a big deal. So that was just, I don't know, personally, and then also getting to see not just like my friend, but to see these people who probably never even dreamed that this was possible, just make it happen and do such a stellar job was so awesome. I was live on NBC, like in the studio, as a guest during the launch. They're like, you want to come in for live launch coverage? And I was like, yeah, sure, it sounds fun. And it's launching and they're asking me questions and I'm just like frozen watching the screen, just holding my breath. Like, yeah, it's that was such an unbelievable journey, even just watching it from afar and getting to share it with all of my other friends and colleagues. Like, that was really a pinnacle prime moment of the year, I'd say.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but watching the Netflix documentary and all the press coverage and all the interviews they had to do, could they have chosen 4 more eloquent, sorry, and irony there, me losing the ability to talk all of a sudden, but 4 better people to put in front of a camera and talk and explain what they're going through and their emotions? They all just seemed like naturals in front of with the media, didn't they? It was incredible to see.
I mean, I conducted some of those interviews, and it's like, you know, I've interviewed a lot of people, and, you know, not everyone is comfortable doing it, likes doing it, whatever. And the entire crew, they were so passionate and so excited and really just fully believed in the mission, really wanted to do a good job. I think that especially as, like, you know, civilian astronauts, there's been so much public discussion over who qualifies as an astronaut, yada, 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 whatever. And I think not to prove themselves, but just to do it well and to do it right, you know, especially, you know, Cyan being a scientist and an analog astronaut, you know, Haley, she's such a role model. And I think that they really were just so dedicated to doing it right. And they were so excited about it that just shone through in all of their media coverage and all of their everything. And I think that's part of why people responded to it so much.
I don't think I've ever been so invested in a crew and their success as I was this time round. And obviously crews have been launching the whole of my life, but this one really, I just was so invested in it.
Yeah. You know, they were like, 4 regular people launched to space. And it's like, these are not regular people.
No, absolutely.
But I think that the way they communicated with the public and the way that they, as you mentioned, did those interviews, like, people could really, like, see themselves in them. People could really, like, be like, wow, like, that's what I would be like going to space. Like, I would be that excited. Like, oh my gosh, like I would totally want to do that too. And I think it made it more real for people, because I think that sometimes it's almost like the white coat effect with doctors, that people see the blue jumpsuit on astronauts or the orange pumpkin suit, and there's like an intimidation factor, and they see it as so separate from themselves and it's so far away. And I think that it really was a cool reminder and connected the general population to the crew in such a unique way, and showed them that people who go to space are human beings. They're real people. They're not some other superhuman species. Like they're regular people, like, you know, and I think that was so special and cool.
Yeah, I feel like they made space accessible again, because even though they got some criticism for, you know, doing the Netflix documentary, which I think is kind of silly. I'm like, if it's your mission, you should be able to choose what format you want to put it on.
Yeah, and if the big purpose of the mission is to share the story of the mission, wouldn't you want to share it on a large platform and show people the ins and outs?
Absolutely.
I think the documentary was a wonderful thing.
Me too.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Yeah. I think, you know, because a lot of people have Netflix, so it's not like totally inaccessible. But I think that you know, the one thing I heard most from people who weren't, you know, space aficionados or professionals was, you know, they made it accessible. They made it seem like, you know, regular people can go to space. I don't know if I'll ever go to space, but it sure made me have a hope for an inkling that maybe someday I've got a chance. Maybe I got a chance someday, because, you know, these are non-astronauts that, you know, I've seen the NASA application to apply to be an astronaut, and I don't qualify for a single thing. So I'm like, you know, maybe I have a chance elsewhere. I don't know. I think it gave people hope, which is in 2021 was kind of a big deal, because we still had so many crazy things happening in the world.
Yeah, I mean, so much inequality all over the world, so much social injustice. We're still trudging through a pandemic, people losing their lives all the time. And I think being able to, you know, even just sit at home and watch people like yourself, and it didn't have the air or the vibe of all these people, like they just won the lottery, they just got so lucky, and there wasn't that bitterness surrounding it. It was, wow, like I couldn't be happier for them. Like, this is so cool. Like, I want to do that too. Like, this is so fun to watch them do it. Like, let me learn, what are they doing? How can I get involved? Like, I think it really took that tone instead. And I mean, we've seen the other flip side of that coin. We've seen the backlash, and we've seen the bitterness, especially with we've seen it with the Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic launches this year. No shortage of bitterness in my inbox. But I think that Inspiration 4 was definitely different. And whether it was the documentary or the tone or how they dealt with the media, or the entire project in general, or the fact that it benefited St. Jude, I think that it really had a very unique impact. And
I suppose that does lead us on, obviously, to the billionaires in space, and this ongoing conversation that's been had over and over again. And obviously, we're not going to rehash. We all know what happened. If you didn't go back for our previous podcast, but you wrote I think it was you that wrote a really interesting article about how we got to reframe this conversation.
Probably.
You've written many. I'm sure you've written many.
I've written
articles.
A lot of
Yeah, exactly. But I remember.
I'm like, yeah, that was probably me. I can't remember. It feels like 10 years ago already. It's like this past summer, 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Couldn't tell you.
Absolutely. But it's true, isn't it? I mean, we do. I think as a space community and as communicators within that, we've got to try our best to try and reframe this conversation, because.
Absolutely.
And the billionaires have made it difficult, apart from Jared, who made it really easy. And that was a great example of that.
Yeah, he didn't put himself at the forefront. He didn't make himself the face. He didn't put his billionaire-ness at the front of the mission, which seems like a given, but we've clearly seen that is not always what happens.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be gained from these missions as well. These suborbital flights that perhaps isn't being communicated as well, and the technology gains and all these kind of things. I just think we could be doing better. But it has been a huge part of space this year, without a doubt. The opening up of space to the world. You know, and this last week, Japanese billionaire in space doing his videos from the ISS and Inspiration 4 and the Blue Origin flights, so on and so forth. The movie being made on the ISS. Yeah. It's been a crazy year for space tourism.
Yeah. Dylan Taylor one of our guests went to space. I mean,
can I be your next guest to go to space?
Yes, you can.
Yes, I know. I'd like to volunteer to go with you.
Yeah, I'm manifesting it. Yeah,
I want to be anywhere but space right this second. Honestly, no, I'm joking. And Taco Tuesday, but no, but like it is Taco Tuesday here. But seriously, like that morning that it was announced that Dylan Taylor was going to space, I woke up to a text from Dave, and he was like, "Oh my God, one of our guests is going to space," and I'm like, "That's the reality we live in now." Is that now there's more, I guess, accessible or regular people. Not that Dylan is very accomplished, not taking credit from what he's done. He's I like his he wrote an amazing book this year about Gerard K. O'Neill as well, which I'm giving a shout out to. But it's like knowing people who actually went, it's like it makes it a little closer, It
does. It doesn't feel like I think still a lot of people think of space flight and they think of the shuttle or they think of the Apollo era. That's still the closest. Yeah, it's untouchable. And it's like I think that a lot of what has been said about the billionaire space race, a lot of the criticism is definitely valid. There have been missteps. There have been aspects of it that are ethically and morally gray. There are definitely valid criticisms, 1,000%. And I think that as a journalist, it's definitely important for me to note that. But at the same time, I do feel like at least the general public they just don't know all that can be gained from things like this. As you mentioned, suborbital research. Suborbital research is something we've already been doing for years, and that has been a part of things like atmospheric science, climate science, that different science payloads fly on with so many different suborbital missions. And by having people who have the means fly, we can at the same time carry science on these flights that otherwise might not have the funding to go on a suborbital flight. And there are very significant and concrete benefits to these flights happening. If you don't subscribe to the belief that seeing people do it is inspirational and opening doors, even if you don't see that aspect, even if you don't get on board with it, there's seriously concrete, exciting scientific aspects to continuing suborbital flights. And, it's such early days that, it's unfortunately a very small window of people that can afford to do it or who are lucky enough to do it. So the criticisms are valid, but I don't think that the criticisms would warrant stopping. I think that there's just such a valuable future there for suborbital flights in general and for space tourism. There's a lot of lofty, pretty ambitious space tourism efforts and things in development. And I just think it's really interesting in opening it up. Actually, one thing I was really surprised by that I thought I would just be rolling my eyes about is William Shatner's flight. I am a huge Trekkie. I have a Star Trek tattoo. I got my pips on my wrist. But when I heard that Shatner was flying, Shatner has had some bad publicity, saying some pretty unkind things, and I was like, this is gonna go south. I'm kind of disappointed. I don't really want to see this. And then, as you all saw, he got back to Earth and he burst into tears and was just like in absolute awe. And I think that even, whatever you think about Shatner, and there are some seriously valid criticisms of him as well, I think that seeing someone like him, a face that people recognize, and a leading man in all respects, a Hollywood actor, break down emotionally on live television because of the beauty and awe of outer space and seeing Earth from space and the overview effect. I think that was exceptionally powerful. I think that was, I think that surprised a lot of people, myself included. And I think that was a really surprisingly positive little silver lining to all of the back and forth and negative discussions surrounding the flights.
So what were some surprise stories that you would say blew up space.com this year?
Oh my gosh.
I know that would get a reaction.
I swear, I am always surprised by what people click on versus what they don't click on. Of course, me thinking that, still going by the goofus and gallant highlights rule of ethics. My main area of interest is climate science, and I'm like, climate change is so important. It affects all of us. Everyone's going to be dying to read this IPCC report that I wrote this whole article and did all these interviews for. No one cared. But
I understand. I'll write history articles and it's like, man, this article is bomb. I got so many interviews. I did so much research on it and like 2 people read it. And I'm like, wow, thanks to the 2 readers that got this.
I think I just need to figure out how to make climate change more fun to read about. I think that's my new challenge for 2022. It's an impossible task, but I will make it happen. But I think the most surprising things that people click on it's always like sky watching things. Like I think people are just so much more interested in the night sky than I really thought and gave them credit for. I mean, like, I'll write some article that will take me, not that much time about, Venus is especially bright in the night sky, or there's an interesting alignment or a conjunction happening, and people really respond to it. I think that maybe especially during the pandemic, people have really maybe almost rediscovered the night sky in their backyards. And I think that that's been really fun to see just how strongly people have responded to that. And of course, every time Elon does something, people respond quite a bit to it, but that's never surprising. But yeah, I think that just people's response to sky watching in general has been so tremendous. And I attribute it to the pandemic, but that's just a guess.
I like that a lot. It's quite a romantic notion that everyone started to look up again. I think that's pretty cool. Right, one more question in this review. Is there a book, a TV show, documentary, or film that you really enjoyed this year?
Does it have to be about space?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Not necessarily.
I am reading Natalie Starkey's new book on volcanoes of the solar system, and it's very good, but I haven't finished it, so I can't put it on my list yet. But so far, it's incredible. But the one book I read this past year that just like blew me out of the water. I mean, I read it. I think I sat down to read it, and I did not get up again until the book was finished, which is a very healthy habit I have. And it's Delia Owens' Where the Crawdads Sing, and it's this kind of almost murder mystery fictional look at this like swamp region of the American South in the mid 20th century. And it's a fictional story, but it also kind of follows like a young girl's path to becoming a scientist and a naturalist on her own without the help of society. And it's so bizarre, and I think shows kind of like the scientific world through a really strange and unique and beautiful lens. And it's just a wild ride. And I heard they're actually making a movie about it, which is super exciting.
Oh, wow.
So I'm always nervous, when you fall in love with a book and they make a movie about it and you get so excited and you rush to the theaters and then you walk out 2 minutes later thoroughly.
It's hot garbage.
Yeah. So I hope it's not hot garbage. I'm cautiously optimistic, but the book was incredible. It's kind of science, kind of sci-fi, kind of murder mystery, very weird, very cool. Yeah.
Well, we are space and things, so I think that definitely nicely straddles the two rather well. I need to check that out. That sounds right up my street as
really
well. Good. Emily, do you have a favorite book, TV show, documentary?
Oh my God. I have like 5 different books this year, which kind of sucks. At this point, I cannot rate one like at the top because I feel they're all excellent.
Can tie. That's fine. You make your own rules. Yeah.
So I'm just reading the Nicole Stott book now.
Nice.
I think it's back to Earth, and I really like it a lot. The Bruce McCandless book, Wonders All Around. I love it. Also, the Al Worden book, The Light of Earth, and I really fell in love with the Ron Evans book, A Long Voyage to the Moon by Jeffrey Bowman, who we had on our show. Yeah. I love that. That was a delightful book. So those are probably my top 4. If I didn't mention your book, if you're listening, I apologize. I probably still really loved it, but those are probably my top of the year so far. I haven't read Eileen Collins's book yet, so I need to do that.
Don't tell her.
ASAP,
Don't.
I need to do that. I haven't read it yet, but I need to.
Yeah.
My favorite documentary. I don't watch a lot of TV. I know I need to watch the Inspiration 4 one. I am embarrassed to admit I have not watched it yet.
You will love it. You will love
amazing.
it.
I love The High Frontier, the story of Gerard K. O'Neill. I thought it was beautifully done. I'd been waiting for that for like ever since they announced it, and I was not disappointed. I felt it was spectacular. So big ups to them.
Yeah. My favorite book, the one I couldn't put down was Bruce McCandless III. I just thought that the story of his dad and the family life, there was just a real great human element to that book, which made me want to read more and more and more. But yeah, there's plenty I need to read. But Emily, I can't believe you didn't mention For All Mankind.
Oh my God!
For All Mankind.
That's not really a documentary.
Well, I did say
I got a little hooked on the documentary.
You said TV shows, movies.
Oh my God! How did I forget that? I'm a little obsessed with that
still
show.
Not
I need
over
to.
that season finale.
I'm not over it.
No.
I'm still like crying myself to sleep at night over the ending.
Oh.
I mean, for real. Oh my God, that ending like broke me.
I'm extremely embarrassed to admit that I haven't seen it yet.
All right. Well, no spoilers from us.
I won't try to spoil it. We won't try to
don't
spoil
say
it
because it's very high on my next watch list.
Yeah.
Because everyone's been screaming at me to watch it. And
It's
I
really
for good
good.
reason.
It's really good. It's just every show is like, oh my gosh. Like,
The
But
finale.
can there be a show that isn't just like devastating? Come on.
Absolutely.
You know what we need to do is when the next season shows up, we need to do like
a reaction.
Yeah, reactions to the episode.
Yeah.
That would be like I'm such a loser. I love to watch reaction videos.
We have a whole TV show dedicated to that in the UK called Gogglebox, which is just watching
Gogglebox?
people watching TV. I kid you not. It's literally there's like a group, like 15 different couples or families watching TV, and it's just an episode of watching them watch TV.
Me and my husband love reaction videos on YouTube, especially. I don't know. I'm so sorry. Like, this is my entertainment. I don't watch TV, but I watch like reaction videos to TV or music videos or songs where people find out like the singer isn't who they thought they were, and it's hysterical. Like when they found out the Bee Gees were white, for example, on one of them, I almost died. So we need to do a reaction stuff For All Mankind.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Chelsea, definitely watch it. That the season 2 finale is possibly one of the greatest bits of TV I've ever watched. I'm putting that out there. It's incredible.
I've got a couple days off for the holidays, so I'll put it on my Netflix queue.
Bring some tissue.
Yeah. I know that it's kind of it hasn't happened yet, but should we put James Webb on our best of 2021 list?
I don't want to jinx it.
I'm scared.
Yeah. I don't want to jinx it.
We'll save it for 2022.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I have my it's not a Webb telescope, but I bought a necklace and it has a star on it, so I'm actually gonna wear this the day of.
Nice.
I just got it in the mail, and I have a space shuttle. Maybe I'll wear that too, even though the Webb cannot be serviced by the space shuttle.
Yeah.
So, or any spacecraft.
I just remembered that I forgot I've got a little Webb lapel pin from when I visited it at Northrop Grumman before it was boxed up and shipped out. And
Nice.
I left, I'm on the East Coast, but I live in California, but I left it at home. I'll make a new one.
With the mirrors.
Yeah, right. I'll build my own Webb.
Nice.
You know, how hard could it be? $10 billion and 25 years later, and I'll have it.
32 years later.
Oh God, yeah.
I'm getting off topic. On Twitter, Jonathan McDowell he put out like a meeting book from when, they were talking about the next generation space telescope, which is JWST.
Mm-hmm.
It was from 1989. I was like, oh, so I was 11 when they came up with that. Now I'm 44.
Yeah. They didn't even start technically developing it until 96. So it had already been so many years in development before development. Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long. I was not born yet when that conversation happened.
Yeah, I was 11 when they started, and now I'm almost mid 40s. Oh my God. I'm afraid to watch it.
It's gonna launch at some point. It is going to launch. It's gotta go up at some point. It's gotta. Where else is it gonna go?
Yeah.
It's going to.
We have no choice.
L2. It's going to L2. It's going to be fine. It's going to deploy. Those 344 single point failures are all going to go off perfectly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. Well,
Sorry for scaring you.
Let's all keep our fingers
Yeah.
crossed for that one. Well, thanks for joining us for this look back at last year, Chelsea. Listeners, fear not. while this part of the interview you're listening to may be coming to an end, the interview will continue in next week's podcast, and you'll hear all about what we've got to look forward to in 2022.
One thing that I'm really excited about that I'm bringing to space is this old picture of me. This is when I was 10 years old and going through bone cancer treatment. And so when I'm in space, I'm going to pull this photo out, and, you know, now getting to be in space, my hair is going to float everywhere, but yet hold this old picture of me and show all my patients, all these kids going through cancer treatment around the world, that there's a future, that it gets better, and I'm excited to be part of it.
So, I love talking to Chelsea there. She was great, and I'm looking forward to talking about next year as well with her next week. But one thing we didn't bring up, which I think we need to bring up, it's always difficult this time of year when you do your retrospective and you think about the fact that we're going to be starting next year with some people that weren't with us, aren't with us anymore. And obviously, we don't have time to go through and do obituaries for everyone, but I think for me, the two biggest losses we've had this year were Michael Collins and Glyn Lunny, and both of those losses had a huge impact on me.
Absolutely.
We did episodes on them, but certainly this year has definitely been marked by the losses of those two people for me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big hole in the space community where, you know, I always enjoyed seeing them at events and stuff like that. You know, I mean, it was just, it's just weird to think that you're going to go places, you know, in the future to events and you're not going to see them.
Yeah.
And it's really like an emptiness there. So, and Al Warden finally was laid to rest last week.
I saw that,
he
yes.
did pass in 2020, but he was laid to rest at Arlington. So kind of a closing a circle there. But, we still keep them on our hearts every day, and we miss them a lot, and we definitely wanted to pay at least a short tribute to them this week.
This operation is somewhat like the periscope of a submarine. All you see is the three of us, but beneath the surface are thousands and thousands of others. To all those, I would like to say thank you very much.
And so we've got 2 weeks worth of news to get you up to date with, so we'll try our best here. Since our last recording, we've had 8 successful launches, 1 partial failure and 1 complete failure. It's been a busy season. Busiest of all have been SpaceX, who have completed 4 launches of their Falcon 9 rocket, 1 from Vandenberg in California and 3 from Kennedy Space Center. The last of these launches marked their 100th successful landing of a first stage rocket booster, which is nuts. And on the 6th anniversary of the first one as well, which was, how about that for a coincidence? I still love watching these things land. They make it look so easy now, but it blows my mind every time. Talking about rockets that land, Blue Origin completed another suborbital flight of their new Shepard rocket. NS-19 took 6 astronauts this time into space for a brief trip, including the daughter of Alan Shepard, who the rocket is named after, Laura Shepard Churchley. I love that story. I thought it was great. Elsewhere, we had a successful launch in New Zealand for Rocket Lab, 2 successful launches by the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation in China. The partial failure was a Russian Proton M rocket, which shut down just before its intended altitude. So while the payloads are in orbit, they're slightly lower than they should have been. They may be able to boost the orbits if required, and if so, this launch will get upgraded and reclassified as a success. So wait and see with that one. The failure took place in China, where ExPace tried to launch 2 payloads on a Kuaizhou 1A rocket. I've not been able to find out exactly what happened here, but it's the second failure out of 14 launches for that rocket. As always, videos of all the launches and details of their payloads can be found in our show notes on our website, www.spaceandthingspodcast.com.
In episode 67, we reported the launch of a Soyuz rocket, which took Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa and his videographer Yozo Hirano alongside their cosmonaut commander Alexander Mazurkin. Well, after 12 days, they have now landed back on Earth. The 2 tourists made and uploaded 14 videos in space while they were there, which can be found on their YouTube channel. They're in Japanese, but some of them have English subtitles, which is a nice thing. While they were on board, they also became part of the record of the most people in space with the launch of the Blue Origin new Shepard rocket for a brief moment. There were 19 people in space.
Nice. That's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Meanwhile, on Mars, the Perseverance rover has identified carbon-containing organic chemicals in some of the rocks it's been looking at within Jezero crater. This is a pretty big news story. However, it's not currently proof of life on Mars, as these organics can be produced by both biological and non-biological means, so further research is still required, and it's why it's important that we somehow try and get these samples back on Earth for more research, something that NASA and ESA are teaming up to try and do as early as 2031. Also on Mars, Percy's little flying companion, Ingenuity, which we spoke about at length, has completed both its 17th and 18th flights on the planet and has now logged over 30 minutes of combined flight time. Not bad for a helicopter that was supposed to just fly a few missions.
Also this week, we've seen the most incredible video from NASA's Parker Solar Probe. We reported the flyby back in April, but we've just found out that the spacecraft actually managed to get inside the sun's atmosphere, which you may have heard called the corona, a very different corona from the one we've heard so much about these last 2 years. The video is really quite something, but we've learned a lot about the sun in 2 papers which have been published. It turns out there are spikes and valleys on the surface of the sun, which help us to understand some of the solar activity we observe from the Earth. The next flyby is expected for late February 2022, so expect even more knowledge and images over the next coming months.
It's been crazy, this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. And talking of new science, the original findings from the samples taken from the asteroid Ryugu back in 2019 have finally been published. The samples arrived back this time last year, and we've now learnt that they're the oldest bits of material ever examined on Earth. And it's hoped that it could be learned all about the origins of the solar system from them. Ryugu orbits the sun somewhere between Earth and Mars and occasionally crosses Earth's orbit, and it's likely to contain material from the nebula which gave birth to the sun and the planets billions of years ago. So a lot more science to look forward to from that over the coming year as well.
Wow, that is mind-blowing.
Isn't it?
Wow. And finally, a couple of announcements. Axiom Space has announced that its second mission has been given approval to fly between autumn 2022 and spring 2023. Their first flight is due to fly in February 2022 and will take 4 private astronauts to the ISS on board a SpaceX Dragon capsule. They have a contract with SpaceX for 4 missions, but they were yet to be granted approval from NASA for the flight. The second flight will be commanded by legendary NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, who is America's most experienced astronaut. And one other announcement, the SpaceX Crew 5 missions will fly its first cosmonaut to the International Space Station. Anna Kikina has been named by Roscosmos, and she is the only active female Russian cosmonaut, and this will be her first flight.
Yeah, I like that story as well.
Yep.
Lots of good news this week, I feel. Lots of good news.
Yep, absolutely.
As always, you can find out more in the show notes.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
So that's it for this week. We hope you enjoyed our look back at 2021, and please do get in touch with your favourite story from this year if we've missed it off. Thanks again to those who continue to support the podcast by purchasing pins or t-shirts or patches, or getting all those things by signing up to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/space and things. Next week, we'll have Chelsea with us again to look ahead at what we might be talking about in 2022.
Thank you for all of your support. If you listen on Spotify, there is apparently now a way of rating podcasts on there, so please do so if you can figure that out. We haven't gotten there yet.
Nope.
We think they're still rolling that feature out. But anyway, don't forget, in space, no one can hear you mean.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.